This is Bonnie with Knots and Needles, and today I'm making a tree skirt, although not a traditional tree skirt. I'm using a short template quilting wedge, so it's 12 inches. I'm going to be cutting 36 wedges. It's going to give me an opening that's larger than normal. When I say larger, I mean it's probably going to be more like 15 inches across. So it's going to, I'm just going to be able to wrap it around the base of my tree and probably overlap some of the ends. Anyway, I'm going to take my marking pencil and trace the wedge in one direction and then the other. I'm using a white flannel fabric here. And so if you're going to trace the wedge, then you cut it out with the scissors. If you don't want to trace the wedge, you can just use your wedge like you do your quilting templates, and use a rotary cutter and then just cut them that way. So again, keep in mind that because this wedge is short and at the narrow end it's 2 inches, so it is going to, like I say, give you a larger opening. Another thing I want to mention is if you have a fabric where your design, where the design all runs in the same direction, and you got critters like this that are all standing in the same direction, you want to make sure you cut accordingly so that they're all facing the same way. May not be important to some people, but it is to me. I don't want them upside down like that. Okay, so use a little more fabric that way, because you can't reverse your wedge and go the other direction when you're cutting it. You have to do them, side by side in the same direction. Okay, so these are my 4 fabrics that I've chosen that I'm going to make my wraparound tree skirt with. And any little ragged edges that you find, just trim them off. This is the order that I want them in as I'm quilting around. So 1, 2, 3, 4 in this case. And I'm going to start with color number 1 and 2, and I'm going to put them right sides together, and they'll be stitched along the edge, the long edge, like so. Then I'll take the next color and lay it with the right sides together again, and sew it down the long seam, and so on and so forth, and then just keep on repeating that sequence all the way around. Regardless of what size wedge you use, the procedure is pretty much the same. So if you want to use like a 9-degree wedge, which would give you a narrow end, and they come like even 24 inches long with a 9 degrees. So it's all a matter of what you want. This is after I've stitched my wedges together, and then I've pressed them. It's very important to press your seams open. And now I'm going to cut the backing. And in order to cut my backing, I have folded my complete circle in half. So when it's folded in half, I have a half a circle, and I folded it with the right sides together. And I've laid the fold of my tree skirt right equal with the fold of my fabric that I'm going to use for my backing, so that once it's cut out and it's unfolded, it'll be a complete circle. Okay, so another thing is on my backing, I'm going to go all the way around, both on the inside of the circle and on the outside of the circle. And I'm going to cut it an inch bigger than my wedge circle. And the reason for that is because I'm going to use that inch to create my trim on my tree skirt. So you want to make sure you go around about every couple inches and use a fabric marker and mark in an inch larger. You can see my marks here. I've gone all the way around and done this, and I'm going to zoom in a little bit so that you can see them a little better. So an inch all the way around on the inside of the circle, and then all the way around on the outside of the circle and on the edges. And then pin it into place before you cut it. Okay, so that's how we did the backing. Now we're on the batting. And the batting, I laid it on the fold in the same manner, but the batting, I'm cutting it the same size as my sewn together wedges. Some people call them blades, but to me it's a wedge. Anyway, so cut my batting. And now I'm going to lay my batting on top of my sewn together wedges. I've got my wedges wrong side up, laying my batting on top of it, lining it up. Again, this is another reason why it's important to press your seams open so that it lays nice and smooth. And then just work it to where it's laying nice and smooth, and you can either baste it or pin it, or I prefer to use a temporary spray to hold it in place. And to do that, I lay the batting down first, and I just kind of tack spray. I don't spray solid, I don't soak it, and then I'm going to lay my tree skirt on top of the batting and place it evenly and carefully on my sprayed batting. Okay, so now we're going to go back to our backing that we cut out, and now on this you're going to go and mark an inch. Remember, you cut it an inch bigger, so now we want to know where that inch begins and ends. So you're going to go all the way around the piece that you cut out, an inch larger, and you're going to mark an inch all the way around, like so. You can see that I've marked my inch all the way around on my back piece. Again, this is flannel. I'm using all flannel. I just kind of like the coziness of flannel, the look of it. Now I'm going to take my sewn together wedges with my batting, excuse me, I'm getting you mixed up here. My batting is temporary adhesive held on, and I'm going to line it up with my marks that I made an inch in. So you're going to go all the way around, and you're going to get it lined up, and then you're going to need to pin it. And we're going to make that our trim when we get this all in place. Self-binding. I did a placemat video last year of self-binding placemat, and I prefer to do that instead of using a binding tape. It just seems so much easier for me. Okay, I've got this pretty much in place, and I'm just double checking that I'm got my inch on all my areas that I need it to be, and it's all laid out, and we're ready to stitch in the ditch on our wedges to give us quilting. So I've taken it to the machine, and I don't know if you've ever done a stitch in the ditch, but you're just going to start at the top of each wedge, and you're going to stitch all the way down to the bottom of the wedge where the two wedges come together. This is with all three layers. You've got your backing, your batting, and your sewn together wedges. So we're just going to sew along every seam. It's a lot of seams. When that's done, we're going to start on our trim. So you're going to fold it in 1/4 of an inch, and then again, and the rest of the way in. And then you're going to take the corner and you kind of fold it over and line it up with the other edge. You've got that folded 1/4, and then roll it on in again. So it's basically just 2 folds in and then doing your corner. You're going to do that all the way around, and we're going to pin it in place. And that's going to create our trim without having to mess around with any binding. I'm also going to sew this on by hand, or sew this down by hand. So I've got my thread started here, and I'm just going to do the basic kind of hidden stitch to sew this down. You'll want to do that all the way around. It seems like a long ways around, but it really goes quite fast. And it looks really nice. And you don't want your needle to go all the way through to your backing. You don't want your stitches to show on the back. And this is what it's like when we're done. And I hope you have enjoyed this video. And thank you for watching.